it's Mike from CMS Critic. Today, as part of the North American tour that we're doing, we've stopped in at the offices of Mura CMS here in Rancho Cordova. Recently, Mura was awarded the Best Enterprise CMS Award by People's Choice through the Critics' Choice CMS Awards, which run every year. This is the third year that they've been in play, and congratulations, guys, on the win.
Thank you.
I'm sitting here with Sean and Matt, who are the co-founders of Mura CMS and their company Blue River, and if you guys can just sort of introduce us a little bit to your company, tell us how Mura CMS came to be.
Sure. We started working on Mura CMS in 2001. Matt and I work in a small boutique web agency and literally created Mura CMS just to solve our own problems. We were obviously very competitive space when you're trying to compete against other vendors in a specific region, and so we created Mura to help kind of differentiate ourselves and also to solve our own problems, in that we didn't want to necessarily be making content changes for our clients.
Right.
At that time, content management was still pretty new. Certainly nowhere as mature as it is today, and it allowed us to keep working on the things that we really wanted to work on, as developers, without being burdened by constant change requests from the client. So it was basically created out of self-interest,
as well as not like recreating the wheel over and over again.
right?
Right. So you wanted to kind of put something in place that fit your needs a little better than anything that was out there at the time, obviously. Where'd the name come from, Mura?
The name came from, it's the name of a river in Europe and a couple other different places, but we were just looking for a name that we could use that was spinning off the Blue River
Okay.
concept.
Got it.
Yeah, so when we first released Mura as an open source project or product in 2008, it actually was released under a different name for a different river, and that river had 4 letters in it. And
so the branding was done for 4 letters.
Yes. So we had to, once we found out that we had to change that, we went back and stumbled upon Mura, and we said, that's good enough. And there was a domain available, so
that's a big one. Yeah, you got to make sure you got the domain name for sure.
Yeah.
So we were talking earlier. We were doing part of the product walkthrough, and you guys were discussing ColdFusion in general, and the way things have changed over the years. And part of this whole discussion, there's a Reddit thread that's going on right now where people are talking about ColdFusion, and some people are making comments about how they feel that it's a dated language. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you would counter that and why you feel that's a misnomer?
Well, people can have opinions, but one thing I would point out is most often the case is that people actually don't know what it is anymore, because CFML has almost the problem of once being hugely adopted, right? So it is, and you never make a case that it's like that. But it's also not the same language as it was at that point. And in fact, within our organization, we mainly use a project called Lucy.
Okay.
You can go to lucy.org and learn about it, and it's an open source CFML compiler. It's actually kind of growing more and more independent, and well, it's totally independent, but the community around that is becoming more and more independent to really not really care about Adobe as much,
right? To
fear what Adobe may do or not do with ColdFusion, the product, and honestly, that's not really. But since we're open source, we feel very strongly about a purely open source stack. So, our typical stack is Linux, Apache Web Server, MySQL, and with Mura, with Lucy. So it's a completely open source stack, and really with Adobe ColdFusion, and many of our clients use it. It actually has great penetration within large organizations still. But for us and our mission and what we're trying to do with Mura, the completely open source stack is really our vision of where we want to go and where we're going. So in that turn, key thing is like that Adobe is less relevant.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess one of the questions that I always ask, especially open source projects specifically, is why open source? When you had the option of either going purely proprietary licensing and just not share the code, and then you have the option of going the open source route, what made you make that decision to go that way in the first place, and do you feel it was a good one?
Well, we obviously feel it was a good one. I feel very strongly about it, but it wasn't. It was a business decision. It was one that we had been thinking about for a while, and some of the problems that we experienced with the enterprise sort of sales cycle, and we felt we could not worry about as much if we could just juice adoption and allow that evaluation period to happen before we get into that sales cycle, and then we could really focus on really serving the project or the product and the community well, rather than focusing on the other things that you would typically have to focus on with a licensed product.
And we're not against closed source or anything like that.
No.
We actually have some closed source or licensed projects coming out.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about Mura 6.2? I mean, it was just released fairly recently. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the improvements that have happened in that and what you're most excited about?
We're really excited about the release. I think there's some paradigm shifting going on within the product or the project. We had a lot of security enhancements. We worked with one of our clients, large organization who we worked with their InfoSec team. It was great together to harden everything if we found things. I'm not saying anything was gaping wide open on the previous releases. That's been really firmed up for this release. Security enhancement, security improvement. We're really satisfied with that, excited about that. And also with the introduction of the new JSON API, it's kind of that's the kind of the paradigm shifting thing that we're hard charging with right now, because we're looking at with Mura, Mura can be multi-homed and have hundreds or even thousands of sites within one Mura instance, and we're really starting our vision of where we want to go and where it is going is that it's becoming a content management hub that can create content and then be consumed throughout your infrastructure. So it's not decoupling the typical Mura front end, or like you should say in terms of like WordPress or WordPress theme, and it has the content in there, and it's really embracing the modern nature of like the JavaScript client frameworks to allow Mura just worry about content and structured output, and having bits of HTML, not completely sans rendering, but having it delivered as JavaScript objects from the JavaScript API, JSON API, which will allow third-party frameworks to consume it as needed. And I think it's really exciting because it's JavaScript is ubiquitous; it's everywhere, and it allows us to have a tool to feed that.
Yeah, and that's even beyond just having other frameworks to consume it. It also just opens up all these different channels. I mean, you really get to the true omni-channel delivery across whether it's an Apple Watch or your public website, your mobile site, a mobile app, whatever the channel is, it makes it possible to consume that content very easily.
Yes. Yeah, you guys have, obviously some of the buzzwords that are going around the industry right now over the last couple of years have been experience management. So we've got people that like to call CMSs WXMs and CXMs and EXMs and God knows what else. And it's difficult because everyone seems to be sort of trying to figure out what terminology they can use that sounds better than CMS, yet as far as I'm concerned it keeps coming back to the same thing. It's just a CMS with some bonuses to it. Mm-hmm. But part of that, you guys are currently in soft launch for a marketing component as well that you've added into Mura. Can you talk a little bit about that and what your plan was and how it's going to work?
Yes, but first I really like to talk about how experience management really is kind of content management with bonuses.
Yeah.
The first time I heard when I first heard people start using that term, experience management, to be honest, I was really confused about what that meant.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, when I think of experience, I think about like going to Disneyland. Something where it really kind of consumes, your view of whatever it is that you're doing.
Like a virtual reality machine.
Yeah.
Or no
You know,
software.
just something that's a little bit, more immersive. And people used to, and maybe they still do, still kind of do this from we create like immersive web experiences, and that always seemed like kind of a weird thing, when really as users we're trying to get the content, we're trying to get the stuff that helps us do whatever it is that we're trying to do, entertain us, solve a problem, whatever. And so that was very confusing to me when you would have, products kind of roll out things, and essentially they'd be replacing, a widget on a page, here and there, and that would be considered experience management. Yeah, and it is. It is changing the experience.
Like,
not
the recommendation widget.
Yeah, and not to take away from that, because that has a lot of value.
Yeah.
But there's just a big disconnect between. Yeah, there's just a big disconnect between, as a user, my experience didn't feel like an experience. It felt like like web content with bonuses. Like I said, because it's tailored a little bit more towards my interests.
Yeah, I mean, part of the thing that's always kind of, and I wrote a big article about the differences between all these different acronyms and CXM and everything, and then there's a lot of people that refuse to accept using any other term, because if they use the term CMS and analysts are using the term CXM, then they feel like they're not going to be up on the lingo, right? And really, I mean, I agree completely with the concept of, an experience is like, I'm going to Disneyland is going to be an experience I'm going to remember. Visiting your website is not going to be one. It's not. I'm not going to sit down with my wife at dinner and say, you know what, I was shopping on Amazon today, and man, they just nailed it on the personalization. I just don't have that conversation, right?
I had a shoe in my shopping cart, and they recommended socks.
Yeah, and it was just like, mind blown. But and it's not to say that there's not value,
Of course not.
in personalization, and there's not, and that it doesn't work, because it does. I go to Amazon, I go to these other websites, and they upsell me on stuff. And yes, I've bought stuff that's been recommended for me before, and that's fantastic. But again, it's not dinner time conversation. It's not an experience in that aspect, as far as I'm concerned. It's an experience from the person, the marketer, to you is where the experience is happening, not the other way around. And I think that's part of the problem. I think the products, if you're going to rename them Marketing Experience Management or MXM, because it's not the customer that's having that experience, it's the marketer going, I get to totally target this guy. This is the best time of my life.
You'll remember that.
That's exactly what's happening, right?
Well, that is actually an interesting thing to bring up, because I wrote a blog post last week that basically begged the question, is the right message at the right time the wrong message to content marketers? Because the whole point of content marketing is to try to provide value, that's separate from your product or service. You're trying to help someone. That's the whole point of it, right? Is to create value in what it is that you're offering, and that in the result of that hopefully should be a better experience, with the brand or the product or what have you.
Yeah.
And so I like the way you said it, but I also think that there is a way to do that. There's a white paper we sponsored recently by Robert Rose from the Content Marketing Institute and Digital Clarity Group, called Connecting Content Marketing Experiences. And Robert's point in there, which I absolutely love, is that it's not about the right message to the right person at the right time. Experiences are really about the right value to the right audience in their time. And then and this is kind of leads me to talking about the Mura Marketing Edition. That was one of the foundational concepts for us when we started thinking about how we're going to put this together. Obviously, the expectations for people nowadays is that we expect things to have some level of personalization, and the more that it is tailored to help us do the job that we're trying to do, the better. We're always going to appreciate that. And so when looking at the Mura Marketing Edition, we kind of looked at these different aspects of it and say, how can we do that well without getting into that mindset of just pushing marketing messaging at people?
Yeah.
And we started looking at the different frameworks and kind of philosophies of content marketing, and content plays such a huge role. And in some ways, I think content marketing is maybe the wrong word also, because if the heart of it is to provide value, it's not really about marketing. It's really about, your ideal customer service before they're your customer.
Yeah.
Right? So So when the thing is, content drives so many aspects of it, from marketing automation, to your web experience, to, everything, they basically touch, in the world of digital.
Yeah.
Right. So when we looked at the Mura Marketing Edition, that was one of the things that we really took to heart, and trying to tie those things together. If someone spends a lot of time creating a nurture program or creating, a way to have a conversation with someone who may be their ideal customer, they're spending a lot of time putting all these things together in the marketing automation system. It can be a fair amount of work. It's a fair amount of content creation. But many times when people go to your website after starting that conversation via email, it's completely forgotten when they come to your website. And so looking at the content part plus the idea of trying to sync up these conversations that marketers are trying to engage people with via marketing automation, and tying that together so the whole experience
to the end result of whether they actually become a customer.
Yeah. It was really, part of, was kind of the big idea behind the Mura Marketing Edition.
Yeah, we're really excited about it.
And when are you guys doing your official launch? Have you got a time when you're going to really be pushing it, when we can provide more information?
Well, it is publicly launched, and we're rolling on that. We'll be at Intelligent Content Conference next week. We'll be at the Marketo Summit, and we'll be at Content Marketing World in September. So we're already out there, trying to beat the pavement, or whatever you want to say in terms of getting the word out.
Okay.
We haven't released our official press release yet, but that will be coming.
Okay.
Very soon.
So stay tuned. You'll be able to find more information about the Mura Marketing Suite once we have that, and probably by the time this video is up,
actually,
you guys will have that information.
it's already up. You can see it at marketing.getmura.com.
There you go, marketing.getmura.com to get more information. I think that's probably the bulk of the questions I'm going to ask right now. I don't want to do the super long interview. So we're going to cut it short at this point, folks. But if you have more questions about Mura, you want to learn anything else about the Marketing Edition, you can find Mura, who's actually going to be featured on our site during their featured week as part of the CMS tour, which we have yet to determine yet, but keep checking on CMS Critic and you'll find it coming up in April. Otherwise, you can visit them on the web at getmura.com. And yeah, thanks guys for sitting down. I appreciate it.
Thank
It's good
you very
talking
much.
with you. Yeah, so.